This episode contains stories of emotional, physical, and mental abuse. If you or someone you know is struggling or in crisis, help is available. Call or text 988 or chat 988lifeline.org. Welcome to the It's Your Story to Tell podcast, where brave people share how they overcame tough times to inspire others in what's possible. I'm your host, Megan Babcock, and I'm also the founder of the It's Your Story to Tell community and website and the Coach Collective. I'm so thankful today to have Tiffany here with me, and I just want to say I am so grateful for you being willing to come on, share your story and what you've learned and what you're currently doing and how you're helping people. I met Tiffany through a Facebook group, actually. We're both nurse coaches. We went through the same training program. She's just a little bit further along in her journey as a coach. And I was so drawn to Tiffany and the content that she was sharing on her Facebook and just how vulnerable she was, that I had to bring her onto the podcast so she could share about her really specific coaching technique. And I think you guys are going to really enjoy what Tiffany has to share with us. This is going to be a 3-part series. So Tiffany is going to tell us about her story and her journey of how she got to where she is today. In part 2, we're going to be talking about trauma and how it affects our nervous system. And then in part 3, I'm really excited about this. She is going to run through a somatic experience demonstration. And I think that's going to be really impactful because I know I was like, what is this somatic experience and how does it work? So I'm actually really looking forward to going through that with you, Tiffany. Tiffany is a board certified nurse coach, and she loves supporting people and taking a dive into the deep end of their healing journey. That is talking my language. Her focus is the human experience, and we're going to learn more about what that means, but bringing awareness to what is happening in the present so we can allow the chains of our past to be broken. Meeting ourselves is difficult when we have lost sight of who we are, and she's able to walk beside her clients on a journey of self-discovery and helping them to feel good and know that they're not alone. Tiffany, that is so amazing. And I just welcome. Thanks for being here with me.
Yes, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here to have this conversation and just to see what comes up from everything.
Yeah. Well, why don't you just start off by kind of giving us a snapshot, right? This is like 20 minutes or so, but like walk us through your journey of the hard, how you overcame it. Like, what was there something that really stood out? Like, was there a breaking point? And then kind of how did you navigate to where you're at helping people to do that hard work of healing?
Yeah. So just like you said, of course, we have 20 minutes, so it's much longer than that, but we're going to give you like a little snippet of it. So to really start with my journey and like kind of prefacing before becoming a nurse coach, I was in a relationship that was quite toxic, right? I was so young. It started when I was 15 years old. So just entering into a relationship at the time that I wouldn't say that I classified it as toxic as I realize it is now, right? To me, it actually felt very normal. Growing up, I had an experience where it was normal to see my parents argue and fight and to be just very emotionally explosive. Um, and so entering into this relationship, even though there was something that was telling me like, ooh, like maybe this isn't, maybe something about this doesn't feel right, there was still this like familiarity to it. And I ended up staying in this relationship for about 10 years. So I ended up marrying this individual, and it became more and more toxic over time. And I heard you speak about like, was there this like breaking point, right? And there were so many small incidents that were like building up over time. So many moments that I would pack up all my things and I was ready to leave and I knew that I needed to leave, but there was just still something that just felt so connective to this person that it was like it felt
Mm.
so hard to break free from. And every time I would leave, I would come right back. And so there was this moment when it was after I got married. I remember like the day that I got married, even the engagement where I was like, "Oh my gosh, like is this truly what I'm destined to do? Like when do I leave?" I knew that I needed to leave, but there was still this I couldn't. Like I just couldn't let myself do it. And there was all these thoughts and these beliefs and these stories that I played in my mind over and over and over again about, well, if I leave, what if it's worse out there? And if I leave, like, is it really that bad? Right? Like I convinced myself that I was crazy, that I was like making all these things up, that I was the reason that we were having these disagreements, and that this is maybe what love was supposed to look like, how it was supposed to feel. I didn't really know anything different. And I remember having a really hard time while I was in nursing school. I had some other personal things that were going on within my family dynamic. And I was struggling, right? I was really struggling mentally. I was definitely at this point of like a breaking point.
Mm.
And I remember sitting and like doing my makeup, like, on the floor. Like, if you know me, you know I love like, makeup has been a way for me to heal for a very long time. It's where I
Mm.
get to be really centered and I feel beautiful and sensual. And I remember talking to my partner at the time, and I remember just saying, like, "I'm really struggling. Like, I'm really having a hard time." And it was really hard for me to ask for support, right? I'm the older sister, I'm the secret holder. Like, I always had this
Mm.
face of just keeping myself protected and letting people see the good, because I didn't want to burden anyone with what was going on in my own life because I still wasn't even fully sure. And so I remember just sitting there looking at him at the time, and I remember saying like, I need a partner, right? Like, I don't just need somebody to just like be intimate with. Like, we can go be intimate with anyone. Like, to me, intimacy is like having this connection. It's being able to be
Mm.
vulnerable with one another. And I remember within an instant, right? That's all this person heard was like potentially being intimate with someone else. Right? He missed
Mm.
everything else that I was saying. And it was this explosiveness. And I
Mm.
remember in that moment being like, is this is this everything that I have to look forward to for the rest of my life? There was like such a deep realization that nothing was ever going to change. And I remember in that moment also realizing, am I ever going to change? Right? I
Uh-huh.
thought about packing my stuff up and I'm like, why? You're just going to come back. And I remember in that moment, like something else happened, like something else pushed me, and it was something so silly. And I remember in that moment being like, this is never going to change. It's scarier to stay here than what could potentially be on the
Mm.
other side. And I remember just
Wow.
packing all of my stuff, right? Like for the probably like the 300th time, right? And
Mm.
like putting all of my stuff in garbage bags because I did this so many times. Like it just felt so familiar, but there was something so different in this moment. And I knew that that was going to be the day that I never turned back. And I remember just loading it all into my car and driving away. and never looking back. Like there was, and I have to attribute it to the people who like were in my nursing school at the time. So I was in nursing school while all of this was going on. Um, and I remember just like the support that I felt from these people that had no
Mm.
idea what was truly going on behind the scenes. They could just see a shift in me. I'm a Cancer, so it's like I wear my heart on my sleeve. Sometimes it's difficult for me to pull things back when it's so heavy. And that support is truly what got me through, and they had no idea what they were even supporting me through in those moments.
Wow.
And so it's like I eventually leave, and I kept my word to myself for the very first time. I had broken my word to myself for years, right? For years. And so flash forward, right? Like this is now, it's been like a decade, but probably when I remember I was remarried at the time. I had two beautiful children. You know, I had everything I could have ever asked for, right? I was now remarried to this like amazing human being who truly played such a huge role in allowing me to just like really go through my own journey of healing and what that looked like.
Mm.
And I remember sitting there next to him and just feeling like so sad, right? For a really long time, I don't think I truly let myself like grieve the
Mm.
version of myself that I had lost and all of these things that I had gone through, right? Like I was you'll see I talk about the nervous system a lot. Like looking back, I realized I was in this like fight or flight where it was like, I just have to keep going. Like, how am I going to survive all this change, all this disruption? So many people not liking me because they didn't know the true story. I was still protecting so much and I wasn't sharing my story, right? Like,
Mm.
only very few people knew what was truly going on. And so, I remember like at this time, right? Like so much time had passed, probably like 5 or 6 years. And I was just sitting on the bed with my husband and I was just crying. And I was like, I'm like so happy that you've not experienced the things to a degree that I have. But I remember just like crying for myself. And I was like, I'm just so sad for me. And it was the first
Mm.
time I think I truly like let myself grieve the losses that I had experienced. I don't think a lot of people talk about that when you've been through like emotional abuse and mental abuse and physical abuse, this part of yourself that you grieve, this life that you thought was going to be, that you grieve that. And
Mhm.
I'm so thankful that I had a person in my life who was, you know, so certain of himself that he was able to let me express and just grieve this thing that I had been going through for what felt like forever. And I remember just sitting there and I was like, it sounds so silly, but this is really what transcended me into nurse coaching and diving a little bit deeper was looking through TikTok. And I remember like coming across this video and someone speaking about mental abuse and emotional abuse and like
Mhm.
narcissism. And I was like, oh my gosh, I don't think I realized I never connected what I had gone through. And I knew, but I didn't know like within my body and soul. And so there was this moment of like, oh, we have so much more to do and we have like a story to share. And
Mhm.
that really catapulted me into doing so much more of my own deeper internal work. And it led me eventually to finding the Nurse Coach Collective, which is where I became a nurse coach and really so much more came. It was so much more than me just stepping into coaching. It was really me evolving my own identity and it allowed me to go deeper in my own journey in such a way that was so unexpected to me. And
Mhm.
yeah, it's just really it's been such a journey and it's something that's what it is. It's a journey and I know that it's going to be this like evolution with each step that I've taken I look at myself even on here today and being like, oh my goodness, like the girl 10 years ago would have been like, what? You're gonna like share your story and
Right.
like people are going to be inspired to like leave their own circumstances, their own relationships that they're in that maybe they didn't recognize were harming them to such a degree because they've been letting themselves feel okay in that situation because that's what they needed to do to survive.
Mm.
So
Wow.
it's, yeah.
Well, as you're talking, I'm like, no wonder why I'm so drawn because, I didn't know all of your story as we were preparing for this, but it's so similar in the path of that I was on in my story. And there were a few things that I just really like stood out to me. And one is it's so hard, I think, for people who aren't experiencing it and living the emotional and mental abuse to understand why people go back or why
Mhm.
people stay.
Yeah.
And on average, I think it's like 7 times.
Mhm.
But that's the average, right? So there's more and there's maybe some less, but like
Yeah.
it really does take so much to stay away because you do feel like it's your fault.
Mhm.
And that mental manipulation is what makes it so difficult to even do the healing because you're constantly trying to be better
Mhm.
because you think it's your fault, but you're like solving the wrong problem. Right. And so then when you explained how you just had this awakening in that moment, I can totally identify with that, where you're like, I am no longer, it's so bad. I'm no longer scared of the unknown, right? Because
Yeah.
we think from a psychological standpoint, there's always this balance between pain and pleasure. Our brain wants to protect us, keep us safe, and keep us in a pleasurable state,
Mhm.
but it can get misguided. And I had that awakening as well, where it was like, I don't even care how hard it is and how bad it might be over there. I
Yeah.
can't keep living like this.
Mhm.
And so for people who are in the journey, I just want you to recognize, like, you will know. Don't shame yourself when you come back because it's going to defer your progress. And if you can just be curious, like, well, why did I go back? Like, start asking yourself questions because it is the awareness that
Mhm.
leads to that ability to make the change. So, those were such key things that I felt like in your story, and I know in mine, that allowed me to move in my journey to a new level. And as we go into this next part of the podcast, we're going to take it a step further, right? Because once you kind of have that level of awareness, it's really scary, and your brain is telling you, no, no, go back, go to what's comfortable. And so we're going to talk about learning to understand your nervous system because you have to be able to make an assessment. Am I really in danger? Or is this just unfamiliar territory for my brain that it doesn't know what to expect? So it's pushing me to go back, because that can also be a hard thing to begin to understand, because we were wired to respond to these triggers. And we have
Mhm.
to rewire. So I'm super excited for us to talk more about that in this next part. So let's just let our listeners really think about this week. What is it in their life that is a fear for them? Like, what is it that is really holding them in a situation? And encourage you guys, just get curious and then come back next week, because we're going to talk about giving you a better understanding of your nervous system, because like you said in that TikTok, it's the education that then brings even another level of awareness. So you now know, like, oh, this is what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for being here. Tiffany's information is in the show notes, so I'd love for you to go along and follow. If you know somebody who is feeling stuck, whether it's in a relationship, in a job, all of this can apply into
Mhm.
these different scenarios. Share this with them, encourage them to continue to watch this 3-part series because I think it's going to really unlock some things and allow people to move forward. Tiffany, tell us where they can find you on social media and your website, and then we will just say goodbye until next week.
Yeah. So, you guys, I hang out often on Facebook. So, you can just type in Tiffany Homan. I also have a free Facebook community, which it is called Breaking Free with Tiffany Homan Coaching. You can also find me on Instagram at Tiffany Homan Coaching. And those are the places that you can find me at.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, and we will see everyone next week to learn more about our nervous system's response.
Bye, everyone.